Hey everyone. Thanks for joining us for our live stream. Tonight we are going to talk about safer injection and safer use practices with Kacey, who is so grateful to join us tonight for this session that we've been really excited about for a while. My name is Anna. I work with Main Access Points, and just a little bit about what we're doing. These live streams, we're trying to just use as an opportunity to connect with people in our community during this crazy COVID time when we're distant from each other, and hopefully share some of the knowledge and wisdom that we have within our community and create an accessible place for us to share tips, share ideas, and hopefully build some connections with each other. So tonight, like I said, we're going to talk about safer injection and safer use, and then we have some upcoming events as well. Our next month, and here I am trying to pull up the calendar, we are going to connect. Why can't I find the calendar? Guys, tell me a little bit about how your night's going while I pull this up. How is everything?
It's going well. It's going well. I'm like now getting on Instagram trying to pull it up for you.
Next month in April on the 21st, we're going to do a drug testing 101, everything about drug checking, how to use fentanyl test strips, how to use reagents. We're going to do that with Mitchell Gomez from Dance Safe, which is an awesome organization. If you don't follow them already, definitely catch up with them on their social media. They have a ton of great information. And then in May, we're going to do a session on Know Your Rights, talking specifically about criminalization of drug paraphernalia and drug possession. And then we're going to wrap it up in June with a session on pregnancy and birth plans for people who use drugs, focusing specifically on what it looks like to navigate the world of being pregnant. So that's what we're up to with the live streams. A note on accessibility, we are offering interpretation through ASL or other languages. If people have any requests for that, please definitely let us know ahead of time, and we're happy to coordinate that in advance. And for this session tonight, because we don't have that many followers yet, we can't offer live captioning, but we will turn on the captioning for the recording on our YouTube channel. So if you would like to watch this with captions, please follow up in a couple hours on our YouTube and turn on the captions to access that. Last thing, we are going to have a chat. Please join, please contribute, ask questions, share comments. That chat won't be on the screen right now, but we will put it up on the screen later so that we can have a little bit more engagement together. So if you do want to be anonymous, head over to Twitch, create a cool username. We don't have to know anything, but please definitely join us if you can. I'm going to be done talking. Jesse, how are you? What's going on tonight?
I'm good. I'm ready to get started here pretty soon. I'm Jessie. I work with MAP also, and I'm excited to do this tonight.
Cool. Oh, cool. Hi, I'm Kacey. I am going to talk to y'all about safer injection and have a conversation with Jessie about it tonight. I'm really excited. Oops, sorry, I just turned my slides off. Learning how to use this system. Just a little bit of background on me. I always feel awkward doing this, but I also feel like I don't want people to think I'm just a random person. I've been working in harm reduction for a decade plus-ish. I worked for a long time at a surrender service program in New York City called the Lower East Side Harm Reduction Program. And then I worked for about 4 years at the National Harm Reduction Coalition, traveling the country, giving trainings on harm reduction. And I love doing this. I love talking about safer injection. It is my favorite topic. I have lots of friends who didn't know how to inject safely and ended up with abscesses or endocarditis, so I really love making sure that people can be as safe as possible while they're using. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here and talk with y'all tonight. And if you feel up to it, obviously no worries if you don't, but if you feel up to it, you want to drop like your name and pronouns. I use she or they pronouns, and a little bit about you into the chat. I would love to know who's with us tonight. All right. And I will switch slides while I'm waiting. I see some folks in the chat. It's so nice to see people. I will, while folks are getting ready to put their names in the chat if they feel like it, I'll just walk us through some group agreements I like to use. Obviously, a little different because of the live streaming platform. I love trainings where I can see everyone, but this is really fun too, and I hope there's lots of interaction in the chat box. Some group agreements, what's said here stays here, what's learned here leaves here. So especially like for folks who are on Facebook and you can see their names on the chat, like you don't want to take what people are saying and use people's names and tell their stories outside of the space. So please just be respectful of folks. Flow in, flow out is an agreement I really like. I love when people participate in trainings. And so if you have questions, if you have comments, if you think I'm missing something and want to tell me, please put it in the chat. But if you feel like you're like the only voice in the chat, maybe flow out and let other people be voices in the chat too. Take what works and leave the rest, especially with a training like this. I know that like injection and drug use is really personal, and bodies are really personal. And so what works for me or what I think might not always apply to you and your injection practices or use practices, and that's totally okay. And on that note, agree to disagree. People have different views, different viewpoints. This stuff is very personal, and so agree to disagree. Okay, cool. And if that sounds good, we will get started. Again, I know I said this like 2 seconds ago, but I just like to reiterate, I'm going to be talking about ways to mitigate risk through the process of injecting and other ways of consuming substances. The things I'm sharing are considered, quote, best practices, but none of these tips are meant to be criticisms of the way that anyone uses their substances. People who use drugs have been finding ways to keep themselves safe and have been at the forefront of like developing these practices for years. So if you are using drugs and these practices don't resonate with you, please take what you need from this and leave the rest. Okay, so in the chat, or I mean, obviously Jesse and Anna can chime in too. What are some potential harms associated with injecting substances? And while I'm waiting for folks, I'll just read some of the chat. Some people are driving and listening. Some people are at work and listening. Thank you so much. Zoe says that she is MAP's biggest fan. That's really sweet. So yeah, if you're just listening or you're at work or you're driving, please don't feel pressured to be in the chat either. While we wait for people to chat, I'm going to put Jesse and Anna on the spot. What are some potential harms associated with injecting?
Right. I mean, there's overdose risk is increased with injection, infection risk.
Mm-hmm.
Those I think are two of the really big ones.
Yeah, definitely. Overdose and infection, both viral and bacterial infections. When I think of risk, in addition to, and Zoe's saying vein damage and bruises, absolutely. Yeah, vein, skin, and soft tissue damage definitely can be a risk associated with injecting. I also think of, making sure I'm not frozen. Abscesses, Courtney says, yeah, absolutely. Abscesses are definitely a risk. Olivia, hi. And yeah, Courtney, I think that is how you spell abscesses. And sorry, I'm going to try to stop using names because I don't want to assume that people are wanting me to use their names. But yes, that's, I'm pretty sure how you spell abscesses. It's a complicated
It's definitely close enough.
Yeah, I always misspell it. Yeah, all of these are definitely potential harms associated with injecting. I also think of harms that are less physical, like involvement in the criminal legal system. Particularly, there's like, I think syringes and cookers and cottons are often classed as paraphernalia in a way that other supplies that people might use to consume substances aren't always, though that is, of course, pipes and stuff can be criminalized as well. So criminalization, I think about, and then I think about like the stigma of being someone who injects versus someone who uses drugs another way.
Right, and then like it can be so hard to hide the marks, especially if you need to use veins like other than the basic
Totally
arm veins.
Yeah.
People who get to a point where they have to inject in their necks and foreheads can't hide that.
No, you can't hide that. And also injecting in the neck especially brings another like risk of getting
right. Yeah, I wasn't recommending that.
No, I'm not
injection.
But I'm saying, but no, there is a lot of stigma attached to it, and particularly if you can't hide the places where you're injecting. Absolutely. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for participating in that little discussion. And of course you can continue to drop things in the chat. I think we covered all of these. So I'm going to run people through really quickly all of the injection equipment. And I'm sorry if this is a review. Syringes, obviously you need syringes to inject. There's lots of different varieties of syringes. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes, both in terms of like the amount of liquid they can hold and the size of the needle. For needles, the bigger the gauge number, the smaller, the thinner the needle is going to be. And needles typically come in like 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch long lengths. And then typically syringes that people use for intravenous injection hold either 1 cubic centimeter or 1/2 cubic centimeter of liquid. That's a syringe. I'll take us through some like syringe tips in a second. And also Jesse and Anna, please feel free to jump in whenever. Cookers they look like little bottle caps used to cook or mix substances. And then cottons. I was telling Jesse and Anna before we got on here that for like the first time ever, have no injection equipment in my, or not no, but like don't have cottons and things in my house. So I just made a little cotton out of a Q-tip. I also could have like pulled off, I use 100% cotton tampons, so I could have pulled off a piece of that. Cottons are used to drop through and prevent infections. And the big thing with them is you want to use 100% cotton because if you're using something other than cotton, you might get different particles in there. Also, there can be like glass shards or chemicals or things that you don't necessarily want to be injecting in there. And I also will say that, okay, yeah, it was made bigger, good. They're tiny, but you can also use big cotton balls. Since there's someone joining us from the UK, I will also add here in the US, I don't recommend using cigarette filters. I know that in Europe and other countries, people do use cigarette filters to draw through or have things like Steri-Filts, which are available here but very expensive. I don't recommend cigarette filters here in the US because there are lots of chemicals and like little pieces of glass and things in our cigarette filters that, again, you just don't want to be injecting.
Yeah, I usually say they have all the stuff you're trying to filter out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that, Jesse. And then sterile water. I actually don't have any water ampules, so I just boiled some water and let it cool down. And I'll talk about different water sources in a second. And then gauze, a tourniquet, and I'll talk about like alternate tourniquets as well. And then alcohol pads, absorbic acid if you are breaking down a drug like crack, which is just vitamin C powder. Band-aids.
Or in the UK, the heroin is often broken down with that. Yeah.
Yes, or in the UK, or thank you.
Or other places,
or other places, yes. Band-aids for covering your wound. I didn't put it on the list, but antibiotic ointment, and a sharps container. And then someone is asking in the chat suggestions for what can be used as a filter if someone doesn't have access to an SSP. Cotton tampons are a great option, but anything else or new that folks are using. So as I said before, I would just recommend anything cotton. So it doesn't have to be 100% cotton tampons. I know those are very expensive. It can be a cotton pulled off of a Q-tip. That's how I made the little like cotton roll I showed you. It can be cotton pulled off of a little cotton, or like a bigger cotton ball. It can be cotton pulled, if you, anything that is fluffy cotton, you can use as a filter. Those are the cheapest and easiest things that I know of. But if Jesse or Anna or anyone in the chat has anything that they want to suggest.
I had a question. I know like the cigarette filters, if you're buying cigarettes and taking them off of the actual cigarette, have the chemicals in them. If you're buying like a case of cigarette filters, just the filter, do you think that would be safe, or do you know whether or not that would be safe?
I feel like I've done research on this before. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm also trying to like Google it right now to be pretty transparent. And I think what I have found is that, like, again, in Europe, buying like a baggie or a package of like plain cigarette filters is safer, but not as much in the US because we don't have the same regulations.
That makes sense.
But I will say, we live in an amazing time, and international shipping and international websites are available. So if that's like someone's preferred filter and they can afford it, which of course is a barrier, people definitely can buy cigarette filters from different countries if, again, they can afford it, if they want to. But cotton is also a great resource.
Right, yeah. I just wasn't sure if you were referring to just off of a cigarette or also in the packs. So.
No, totally. It's a really good question, and one that I wish I knew for sure.
Yeah, it comes up a lot in my work, and I always like kind of like talk around it.
Yeah. No, it's hard. I really wish I had a concrete answer on it, and I wish there was like, I guess, research on it. Okay, so I'm gonna run very quickly through the injection process. I'm gonna like demonstrate, but I'm not actually gonna inject. So just a warning if people like need to look away at this point. So first you would find the cleanest, best lit, and safest spot available. I'm at my coffee table. It's probably not the cleanest spot in my apartment, but we're gonna pretend that I just washed it. And then wash your hands, the prep. So I'm gonna get off which is a great alternative if you don't have access to running water. And then you would mix or cook drugs. So going to pour some of my water in here. I'm just going to use water. And then put the cotton in, and oh yes, sorry, I should have made myself bigger. And draw up your drugs. This is my maybe favorite harm reduction tip that I've ever learned from a training that I gave. Someone named Myrna at Tapestry Health in Massachusetts gave it to me. And it's to, if you have shaky hands, which I do, put a like keychain holder on the top of your syringe so that you can, it's of course not working right now, but so that you can more easily like manipulate it with one.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then you would put your syringe with the bevel facing up, which is the eye of the needle, through the cotton and draw up, which I'm doing a terrible job of. Oh God. All right, I'm gonna put it on the table.
Kacey, how do you attach that ring to the plunger?
Oh yeah, good question. I will show you. I'll show you after this because it's now filled with liquid. So you draw up, and the reason you want to do the bevel of the needle, sorry, I said up, it should be down. The bevel of the needle down is because it's the shortest, or it's the sharpest part of, or like it's the flattest part of the needle if you have it facing down, and you don't want to blunt the needle any more than you need to. So if it's the flattest part of the needle against a flat surface. Oh, hi, Be More Power. Hi to Baltimore. I love y'all. The flattest part of the needle against the flat surface, you're going to do the least amount of like dulling to the needle. And then if you're using a tourniquet, this is the part that I always mess up when I'm like in front of people. So if you're using a tourniquet to find your vein, you ideally would hold one on, roll, tie it loose enough that you can untie it with like one hand later. Because then what you would want to do is you find your vein, you would put the needle in, bevel up this time, so the sharpest part of your needle is going into your vein, flag, so you would see a little plume of blood, and then once you're flagged, you would take off the tourniquet, because you can do vein damage if you leave the tourniquet on while injecting, and then inject the rest of your substance slowly. If you can inject a little bit to do like a taste test for fentanyl or something like that, or anything off that feels unusual about the substance, and wait a couple minutes to make sure that it feels right. That is great, but I also understand that people might feel sick while they're doing and might want to use specifically. That's what you need to do. Try maybe to like push the and then you would clean yourself up. You need to put your container. So
I think we might be cutting. I think you might be cutting out a little bit, Kacey. If you wanted to maybe just go over that last part once we get you back a little bit, just because I know I was curious.
Yes. Sorry, let me try to fiddle with
my we live in the world of connection issues now. So
all right, I'm gonna quickly turn my internet off and on, like not my whole network, just my computer off and on again. That normally works.
Thanks everyone for hanging out with us in the chat. Yeah, please keep the questions coming. I know that it's so awesome to have Kacey here as a resource and just to like really dig into this stuff, because we get questions all the time about how to inject safely.
Yeah, and I have a couple questions if no one in the chat has any at this moment, but if I was hoping to have Kacey go back over that last little bit first, though.
I think we're still waiting to get you back, Kacey.
Yeah, I think so too.
I am sorry about this, I guess.
We hear you.
Okay, hearing me is good. I'm going to try to see if my hotspot works.
So while Casey's doing that, here's that kind of 1 through 10 kind of steps. And I think that I really appreciated the point about like, you know, really reminding about like the bevel up versus down part. I feel like that it's kind of a like small thing, but can actually be pretty significant in terms of keeping the needle as sharp as possible and really making it the safest hit. Yeah, Jesse, I don't know if you had other things.
Yeah, I had one thing to add. Just for me, what I find really helpful with adding water to the cooker is I draw it up with the syringe, or if I have the little dropper, then you can kind of measure how much comes out. But I tend to always put too much water and then be like upset about having to do multiple shots. So I find it really helpful to like use the syringe to gauge how much water you actually want there to be in the syringe.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Back, it looks like my connection might be a little better. I'm trying to run a connection test on my phone because it is connected to my internet because everything's connected these days.
We can definitely hear you better.
Yeah.
I can't. Ugh,
I think just go for it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what was the part that I kind of cut out off at?
Right after you put the tourniquet off, I think is when things started to get choppy.
All right. So after you took the tourniquet off, you flagged, you're already in your vein. You want to try to, if you can, inject amount of substance first to like taste it, to say it's what you expect. If it's not stronger than you expect, if it doesn't make you feel weird in any way. But I also know that people sometimes get sick and can't wait a couple minutes to inject their entire shot. That's fine. Just try to inject as slowly as you can. So if you can do just like slowly push the filter in rather than slam the shot, that is great as well. And if you're not slam the shot, maybe in that case, let someone know that you're in so people can check on you. And then you would put the syringe in the sharps container, close up the sharps container, and you're good to go. But I also said that I would show y'all how to put the keychain thing on the plunger. It's super easy. So you just take the keychain. I used to pre-pandemic have really long fake nails, and that this like impossible to do. And of course, as I say that, it's become impossible again. Okay. You take the keychain and just put it on one side of the, and then you've got a smoother way to manipulate this plunger, which is really fun. So thanks to Myrna and Tapestry for a tip. I use it all the time, and I try to credit them as much as I possibly can. So that's the induction process. I think as I was coming in, Jesse was like asking a question though, and I don't want to like cut that off.
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask a question about people who have difficulty getting a flag or maintaining a flag. A lot of people, including myself, but a lot of the people I work with too, will get a flag, and then by the time either they've adjusted their hand or taken the tourniquet off, they've lost that flag. I was wondering if you had any advice for that, because the only thing that I found to really to work is to just not use a tourniquet, which brings other issues.
Right. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think that the only thing I could think of too is to not use a tourniquet. I do have tips coming up for like how to raise veins without using a tourniquet, but I also know that like those aren't always ideal for people, or like those don't always work, especially if people have a hard time finding their veins already. I would maybe try to use like, and I have tips coming up for like alternate tourniquets, but maybe something like a longer thing, like an ace bandage or something that you could more easily like rip off with your teeth, so you don't have to let go of I think might work. I'm gonna like test that now. Yeah, like if you had like this, but then it gets a little loose. So yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't have a great tip for that, but now I'm going to be trying to talk to people and think of them, and I will let you know.
Yeah, it's something I've been, I mean, one thing is like booting can be helpful, but then booting can like bring all sorts of other issues, and like the syringe getting clogged up, and which booting is like when you go out and inject back in and kind of go back and forth with it instead of going in one direction, just in case there's anyone watching who doesn't know what that is.
Sorry, I should have been like, yes, fine. But that of course can bring its own issues and can get the plunger kind of stuck. And I mean, I guess my only other tip, and it's like not an injection tip, so I don't know how useful it is for people who like want to be. No, actually, never mind. I was gonna say like use another way before you inject, so you feel a little like better before you inject, but that doesn't help with finding veins or like staying in a vein. So that's a really good question, and one that I'm gonna be thinking about. Thanks, Jessie.
Let me know if you find an answer.
Yeah, I definitely will. I will definitely keep you posted. So what are some alternatives if people don't have, sorry, I just like very quickly moved on. Sorry, that was a little bit of an awkward.
No, that's fine. I think that's great.
So what are some alternatives that people can use if they're injecting, but they don't have access to sterile water or soap and water or a tourniquet or any of the supplies I just showed, or a sharps container, or time and space to taste their drugs? Any thoughts from the chat?
I would say, or time and space to prepare a sterile environment too. That can be a huge issue.
Yeah, that is definitely a huge issue. Thanks for adding that in. Feel free to add suggestions in the chat. I'm going to run through a few suggestions that I've thought of. In terms of water, if you don't have access to sterile water, which I didn't have access to a sterile water ampule to show y'all, your best options in order of like from safer to least safe is boiling tap water for at least 10 minutes and then letting it cool. You obviously do not want to inject boiling water, but that is super time consuming. And if you are not feeling well, or you don't have a space to boil water in, or you're in a rush, maybe not the preferred option. So then using either bottled water or cold tap water, if your cold tap water is safe to drink, is the next best option. And then if there is no access to tap water, but you are still able to access the toilet, so this might be relevant to people who are injecting in like public bathrooms and parks where the sinks don't work, but there are toilets. You can pull water from the back of the toilet, the tank, and then discard it into the bowl so that you don't contaminate the tank. That's where the water is going to be the cleanest, because obviously we don't use the tank to go to do our business in. And then my biggest water tip is just to avoid stagnant water. So water from puddles, water that's been sitting in a sink or a tub for a while, water that has just been sitting out stagnant has had chance to potentially like grow bacteria that you don't necessarily want to be injecting. So if you can find bottled water, cold tap water, or even toilet tank water from a like running toilet, that is better than pulling from a puddle. or a like full bath. I don't know what situation someone would be in where there would be like a full bathtub but no running water, but still.
Situation. I would say also like I would avoid pulling from a bottle you've been drinking from.
Yes.
Especially if you've had it open all day. But just any amount of really drinking from it probably is not a very safe option.
Yes, that's a great point.
I've seen people do that a lot.
Yeah, I've seen people do that a lot. And something that I usually say in these trainings is that I've seen people do. I don't say it unless I've seen people do it, is like, don't use seltzer. You don't want air bubbles in your water. Don't use anything carbonated. I have seen people use beer. I've seen people use cider. Anything carbonated is not great. And then like anything other than water, particularly like something sugary like juice, is not going to feel great or be super healthy for injecting. Washing. So if you don't have access to water to wash your hands, sanitizer is a great thing. And I feel like now more than ever, lots of people are carrying, like almost all of us are carrying hand sanitizer, maybe. If we can, I mean, it's not a year ago, so I don't think it's a problem to find it anymore. but hand sanitizer is great. A great way to clean your hands before injecting. Antiseptic wipes or alcohol pads. I know alcohol pads are really tiny, but you can like even just use them to clean your fingertips if you feel like you can't clean your whole hand. And then washing your hands with just water if there's no soap available or just warm water is better than nothing. I mean, cold water is probably better than nothing too, just not as good as just warm water. And then even wiping your hands on your shirt if your shirt isn't like super like visibly dirty is better than nothing. But if you're going to wipe your hands, just wipe one way, because if you're wiping in like multiple directions, you are pushing bacteria around. Also true of like if you're cleaning your skin off for injecting. It's really important to get your hands as clean as possible before you inject, because hands touch a lot of stuff throughout the day and could get bacteria on them. I mean, in the past like 30 seconds alone, my hand has touched my sweater, my other hand, my cup, probably my dog who's sitting right next to me. And these just like aren't things I necessarily think about until I'm like actually thinking about them, if that makes sense.
And I'll just add too that we do have hand sanitizer for distribution. So if you access the web through us and you don't know that we do have hand sanitizer, we do have that, and we're happy to give you as much as would be helpful and useful. So definitely always ask for those types of things, and we try to make sure we have them in stock.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. And I'm glad I'm just glad that it feels like more and more programs are able to stock hand sanitizer and hygiene supplies and stuff like that, which is awesome. Okay, so tourniquets. Tourniquets are, I mean, I have not worked in a stern service program in like almost 4 years, so maybe my memory is wrong, but like in my memory, tourniquets were always the supply we were running out of the most, and that people wanted really badly, and we never seemed to have enough of. So I know that tourniquets can be like hard to access, hard to come by, but there's lots of things that can be used in place of tourniquets if you don't have access to tourniquets. Anything that is like stretchy and like elastic can be used. So rubber gloves, the one I have is really small, so maybe would not be good, but like large rubber gloves or even tying two gloves together can work. I gave the example of an ace bandage earlier, a bra strap, a scrunchie that's been cut in half, anything that's like elastic like that. Even the cord of a landline phone, so not your like, I mean, don't know how many people still have these around, particularly the corded ones, but if you do, the cord of a landline phone, so like those curly cords, I hope people know what I'm talking about. I'm old. Not your cell phone charger though. Lots of people use belts or shoelaces or string, things like that. And I get it. Those things are really accessible. Like almost everyone, I would assume, has shoes with shoelaces on them or a belt. Those are things that are really easy to come by. But elasticity is really important because it means that the tourniquet can come off really easily, which you want if something is going wrong. So, and you also don't want shoelaces, particularly because they're so thin, can dig into skin in a really uncomfortable way. So things that are elastic are going to be safer and also provide a little bit more comfort. I mentioned earlier that, there we go. I mentioned earlier that I had other tips for finding veins if you can't use a tourniquet. Again, I also recognize that lots of people have veins that are really hard to find because they've been injecting for a really long time. And so, these are not the be all end all. You are the expert on your own body and you know how to find your veins the best. But if you don't have a tourniquet, you usually have a tourniquet, you're struggling to find a vein, you're struggling to get your veins raised, doing anything that might warm up your body is going to make your veins a little plumper and bigger. So doing light exercise like jumping jacks or jogging in place before injecting can help warm up your body, get your veins plumper, get your blood flowing. Putting a warm compress on your arm or even running it under warm water can be helpful. And then things like coffee or smoking cigarettes actually constrict veins. So if you are a coffee drinker or a smoker, if you're able to abstain from drinking coffee or smoking for 20 minutes before you inject, or if you're someone who injects in the morning to feel well, but also has a cup of coffee and a cigarette, maybe inject first and have your coffee and cigarette afterwards.
One thing I found really helpful a while, when I was in grad school, is I would be doing my shot in the morning, before I went to school, while I was getting ready, and I would just take my shower first. That to be extremely helpful because instead of trying and then getting frustrated and then doing something to fix it, I just always took my shower before I injected. So I'd always just had that warm water.
That's so smart. I love that tip. That's awesome.
I just kind of I built that into my morning routine.
That's great. Yeah. I know someone who went for a morning run and then injected because they were warm. I love stuff like that. And I think Anna said so in the chat, but if you have any tips for finding a vein, please let us know. Like I said, I love sharing people's tips and I always credit people. So
yeah, I would just add to the kind of making a fist or sometimes pumping with your fist can just help in that moment, get things circulated, but definitely definitely gravity helps too. So kind of making sure that you're positioned in a way to really maximize anything. Those things can help a little bit.
Yeah. And also just this is a much more general one. This is not a quick in the moment one, but staying hydrated helps keep your veins plump. So if you can be drinking a lot of water throughout the day, that can also help.
I think experimenting with your positioning too, hey, sometimes hanging your arm down or resting it on something, you can put your body in a lot of different positions than the one you might be used to doing all the time. That can sometimes increase blood flow or just put the veins in a better position.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Good tips. So for sterile injection supplies, including syringes, I don't have a ton of advice besides use your own syringe and a sterile syringe if possible. But I will just say if you cannot use a new and sterile syringe every time, using your own syringe is better than sharing with someone else's. sharing with someone else, and you can still, because like obviously you are not going to give yourself hepatitis C or HIV or like a viral infection, but if you're worried about bacteria, you can still rinse your syringe with cold water, bleach water, even if it's just you reusing your syringe. If you don't have, and that's the same way to kill bacteria and viruses if you are sharing someone else's syringe as well. Cold water, bleach, cold water. If you don't have access to bleach, water, even doing just water works, soap, but you want to use like liquid, like thinned out liquid soap because you don't want the soap to get stuck in the syringe. And then really high proof alcohol might also be an option. If you're using with a lot of people and you know that you might have to reuse your supplies, try to mark your syringe. So like write your initial on it with a permanent marker, or if you have different colored markers, everyone can make a mark with a specific marker. I'm sorry if you hear my dog scratching himself. But yeah, try to mark your syringe in some way just so you know that it's yours. And then same goes for cookers, especially. Cookers, Hep C is, oh God, I almost just poured water on my computer. Cool. Forgot there was water in there. Hep C is a really hardy virus and can live in your cooker for a long time. I'm not going to say a number of days because I hear different numbers all the time, but for quite a while. So it is really important to use your own cooker, particularly if you're going to be reusing a cooker and not using a new one every time. If you have to share a cooker, same thing. You can use water, bleach water, or soap and water, things like that to clean out your cooker to make it a little safer to share. And then what else? Cottons. Lots of people like to save their cottons to do cotton shots later. I am not going to discourage that. I'm just going to give tips for like making that a little safer, killing bacteria on cottons. So what cotton fever is actually the idea that cotton fever is like when a strand of cotton enters your bloodstream is an urban myth. Cotton fever is actually just like bacteria built up in the cotton, and when you did your cotton shot, you injected some of that bacteria. Some good ways to kill bacteria or like stop bacteria from growing in cottons if you're going to keep them is if you have access to a freezer, freezing the cottons. Actually, that is like my only way. Cold will kill bacteria. That is my best tip. If you're someone who doesn't want to do a cotton shot but is worried that if you keep your cottons, you might be tempted to do a cotton shot, it is actually perfectly safe once you've used your cotton to just swallow it.
That's what I do.
So perfectly safe, not going to hurt you at all. So
yeah. Can I add to that? I wouldn't recommend like throwing them in the trash. I find that if I throw them in the trash, I take them back out. And that's really, really a lot less sanitary than putting them in the freezer or putting them aside. Yeah. I always try to suck as much fluid out as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. So good cotton tips.
Yeah, those are really good tips. I have a question, Kacey. One of the things that a lot of people talk to me about is just like the attachment to like using a spoon and just having like something that, you know, that's theirs, that they know, that they're comfortable with, and really not wanting to like use single use or, you know, temporary kind of cookers. Do you have thoughts on like how often people, you know, would consider bleaching their own spoon if someone's just gonna stick with that one thing?
Yeah, thank you. That reminded me I didn't talk about alternate cookers, but obviously spoon is a great alternate cooker. And I would say washing spoons, particularly if you're like the only one using it, is probably gonna keep it pretty clean, just washing it with like warm water and dish soap. But maybe once every week or 2 weeks, I would try to wash it with like bleach or alcohol or something a little stronger, just to make sure I was getting everything off. And like particularly if someone was going to come over and use with me and potentially be using the spoon too. try to get it as clean as possible. But I think if you're the only person using your spoon, typically just washing it with warm water and dish soap most of the time, and then using bleach every week or 2 weeks or so is totally fine.
That makes sense, because you're really just worried about like your own like skin bacteria and and like the bacteria in your drugs, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's less about blood in that case.
That makes sense.
That's a great question, though. Thanks. All right, and then sharps containers are, I think, my last tip. So I was actually really surprised to find that I had a sharps container in my house, considering how little I had of other stuff. But I guess it's because sharps containers are reusable, so I don't throw them away or give them. I mean, if I've had one, I'm not giving it away either. So if you don't have access to a medical grade sharps container, that is totally fine. You can use any thick plastic container to dispose of your syringes. So things like laundry detergent bottles are like, I feel like the classic that everyone talks about. If you're going to use a like drink bottle, you want to use a fairly thick plastic bottle. So like the way that Gatorade bottles feel thicker and heavier than like a water bottle or a soda bottle, that would be a really good option. Of course, if you have like just a thin plastic bottle, that's better than nothing. But the thickest piece of plastic you can find. Sharps containers, laundry detergent containers are also great because they're typically opaque. You can't see inside of them. So if you're worried about like throwing syringes out and a neighbor seeing and there being stigma attached to it, I mean, I am going to tell you to tape it up and write sharps on it. So like people would still be able to see that you wrote sharps on it, but like they wouldn't be able to see the physical syringes, which I feel like there's many layers of stigma that we're talking about here, and seeing the physical syringes definitely I've seen people react to that in a way that they haven't to just like sharps on a laundry detergent container. But once you've written sharps, taped it up, made sure it's sealed really well, you can then just throw it in the trash. So great option, very easy to dispose of sharps with normal household supplies. All right, so let's talk through, and I really am excited to hear Jesse's thoughts and Anna's thoughts on this too, and all of yours in the chat. Let's talk through some options to stay safer while injecting in public, outside, or in less than ideal conditions. So without access to a private home, without access to good lighting, when you're in a rush and you're in public, things like that. Does anyone have good tips or thoughts on that?
I feel like in public can be so difficult, like even just using a public bathroom, because it's like you want to leave the door unlocked for safety, right? But if you leave the door unlocked and you take a long time, people start trying to come in. Like that's something that happens often, is people start like knocking on the door or trying to open it. And it's like, you really don't want that while you're still injecting, but you do want that if you happen to overdose. Yeah, absolutely. A tip that I've heard for that I like a lot is rather than locking, standing with your back to the door and then injecting there like as quickly as you can, but basically standing with your back to the door so that like your body weight is holding the door closed, but someone could push their way in if they needed to. Or if you were to overdose or something were to happen and you were to fall over or something, people could then get in and hopefully you would be done injecting by that point. Definitely not like foolproof, but I think that is one of the better tips that I've heard. Yeah. Another is just like, oh, that is something different. Another is just like trying to, and again, it only works if you're with someone or know someone in the vicinity, but like letting someone know to come check on you or call emergency services if they can't get in after 10 minutes or whatever it is. But again, that necessitates
having someone around.
Well, and also I think one important thing is that you can't rely on this, but it's a good safety measure as like a fail-safe, is that not all overdoses happen immediately.
Yeah.
So getting back into a place where you're visible as quickly as possible,
yes,
can be really important, especially with, I think, injecting outside. That can be really helpful. If you're outside alone injecting, it's so important to be in a secluded, covered area, but you want to pick one where you can quickly get to somewhere where you're actually more visible.
Yeah, absolutely. Once you're done, if you can be as visible a place as possible, that's awesome. Another tip that I have, this is like less staying safe overdose wise and more like sanitary kind of tip, but if you are in public and don't have like a clean surface and don't have anything to clean off a surface, anything like a paper bag, a newspaper, a magazine is going to be like a little cleaner probably than like a table in a park or a park bench. So if you can put down paper or newspaper at all, I know that when I did outreach in New York, we gave out paper bag, like we put everything in a paper bag and told people like, you can lay this down and prep your shot on it. So that's one. And then in terms, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think people found that really helpful, like when they were living in tents too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they're often injecting in their tents, which if you're living in a tent without access to sanitation is like, can become an area that's really not a safe place to inject. And so I would give people extra bags and stuff for that. After you did that training with us up in Bangor,
awesome.
He gave me that tip, and people really found that very helpful.
Oh, that's so great. I love hearing that.
And then also one of the things that I know Jesse has distributed a lot of are just like, portable flashlights, and really trying to make sure that people you brought up lighting. And I think it's such a big part of like having to use, even in like a public bathroom, like sometimes they're like intentionally difficult to see, or unintentionally just like dark. And I think having, obviously if you have a cell phone that has a flashlight, that's cool and can be easy, but just thinking about having like, we hand out small flashlights, and hopefully something that's like small enough to be able to carry with you and make sure that you can actually see what you're doing and find a vein.
I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
And cell phones are so dirty. I think it's important to like be mindful of that when you're using your cell phone light. That totally. Like our cell phones are one of the dirtiest things that we handle.
They really are.
Yeah, they really are. I always try to be mindful of how dirty my cell phone is.
Yeah.
When distributing supplies, when anything that I do.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess the last tip I'll give here is like less about injecting outside or in public, though people who are injecting outside or in public, if they have phones and are alone, can also do this. But if you are anywhere and injecting alone and worried about overdose, you can call a friend and ask them to call you back and call 911, or if they're in the vicinity, come over, or whatever, if they're if you aren't picking up your phone. And then for people who are who don't have anyone in their life who knows that they inject, I've heard of people who, this one necessitates like having a good relationship with a neighbor or someone close by. And it is, I think, a lot more useful for people who are housed than people who are unhoused. But I've heard of people telling their neighbors like, hey, I ordered delivery food. I'm going to take a nap. If I'm not, can you call me in 20 minutes to make sure that I'm awake, so that at least someone's like calling and checking in and knows that something is up if you're not answering your phone. Again, not a perfect tip, but perhaps better than nothing if you're using alone and are worried about overdose risk. Cool. Well, I also want to acknowledge that not everyone injects. So I'm going to go through just a few tips for like staying safer if you're smoking, snorting, or booty bumping or boofing your substances, which is when you are putting them up through your anus. But I'm going to start with smoking. So if you're smoking substances, and I'm talking less about smoking like a joint or a cigarette out of, and more about smoking something out of a glass pipe, like crack or meth. I don't have a crack pipe, but I do have a meth bubbler. It looks like this. It has a bowl on the end where the meth rocks would go. Crack pipes are thicker and like wider and just. But if you're smoking, try to use your own pipe if possible. I know it is like probably not possible to use a new and sterile pipe every time. That could get very expensive and burdensome. But if you can use your own pipe, that's great because pipes get really, really hot. And when things get hot in the vicinity of our mouths, our lips can crack and burn and bleed. And so blood can go on the tip of these pipes if we're passing them back and forth. If you can't use your own pipe, using like, I wish I had one to show, but using like rubber.
I do have those.
Oh, awesome.
I don't even
Cool.
have to see that. We have these.
Yeah, they look like that. You would put them over the tip of your pipe. They work better for crack pipes, which are thicker. But and then you have something that hopefully everyone can have one of. So you can at least have your own one of those if you don't have your own pipe, and that way everyone has a little condom for their crack pipe. My friend Mike calls them, which is great.
Another thing that we give out too, in addition to the red ones, we also have some clear vinyl tubing, like just like literally PVC pipe that, you know, material that you can get at the hardware store. So, so you can either get that through us or just find it at the hardware store. And you can just cut pieces same length and use those as covers as well.
People love that stuff.
That's great. And then another tip, if you're smoking crack, you can use Chore Boy, like the thing that you use to scrub pots. Again, don't have one on me.
Yeah,
cut up pieces of Chore Boy rolled into a ball and like push it down about 2/3 of the way down into your crack pipe, and use that as a filter. It helps remove some of the harmful chemicals from crack. Also, side note, this is not about like safer crack use, but I saw a tweet recently about someone made a TikTok where they referred to smoking crack as vaporizing cocaine. And I saw someone being like, that's the most brilliant way of rebranding crack I've ever heard.
Right.
Yeah, it was so good. Anyway, Chore Boy can help filter out harmful chemicals in your crack, which again is exactly the same as cocaine. That's what smoking crack is. It is vaporizing cocaine. A tip that I have for that is to like burn it a little bit beforehand. Like use a lighter to burn it a little bit beforehand. And then for smoking meth, you don't want to hold meth smoke in after you inhale. Meth smoke can be really harmful to your lungs. So it's not like smoking other substances. Definitely don't hold it in. And then if you are sharing pipes or not sharing pipes, just wipe down your pipe with an alcohol pad or antiseptic wipe after use. Kill some bacteria. Those are my smoking tips. If anyone has any others, please drop them in the chat, or Anna can tell me.
One thing you talked about, Anna had told me about, was for smoking heroin when you don't actually have like smoking heroin, right? Or you don't have foil, but to smoke it out of a pipe, was heating part of the pipe and then like rolling it onto it, which I thought was a really cool, useful tip that I've shared with people. Let me know if I explained that wrong though, Anna.
No, yeah, that's right. I mean, what I've learned is, you don't want to apply direct heat. And so if you use like what Kacey has, that bubbler, if you show that, if you like heat up one part of it and then roll the substance onto the part that was hot, that's one way to prevent the burning from happening.
I'm gonna grab a lighter really quick so I can like demonstrate what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I had seen people doing it and didn't really understand what they were doing, that they were like rolling it like in their fingers, and I always wondered why. So then when Anna told me that, I understood.
Okay, apparently I can't find a lighter. Very unusual for me, but okay. You would like under the meth bubbler, you would like take a lighter and go in a circle. Wait, am I frozen or is everyone else frozen?
I think Anna's frozen.
Oh,
Am I
yeah.
frozen?
I think Anna is frozen.
Okay, she's good now.
Oh wait.
Cool.
Yeah, so you would want to like go in a circle under the meth bubbler, and then if it were like crack or heroin that you were smoking, you would want to like move around the length of them so that you were heating the whole length and getting the heat and no part of it was getting. And that way you also don't burn your drugs off when you want to be smoking them.
Right.
In terms of
the other thing too, Kacey, a lot of people are now distributing like the hammer pipes. So that's something that I know might be useful for people who are smoking heroin or other opiates.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad that there are more resources for smokers now. Sorry, Jesse, I feel like I cut you off.
I was just saying I really would like to be able to get some of those.
Yeah. That's awesome. In terms of snorting substances, I recommend cutting up different colored straws like this. So if you are using with friends, you know which your color is. Pretty simple. The reason I do that is I am sure lots of people on this who are listening to this know, but just in case you don't, snorting can like cause little like micro abrasions in your nostril. That's why people sometimes bleed, have nosebleeds when they snort. And so you can like, if you're sharing a straw or a dollar bill or something and you're all snorting out of the same receptacle, you can be passing around tiny blood particles, and it is a way to potentially contract and spread hepatitis C particularly. So yeah, using different colored straws can be a great way to, so that like you have your own receptacle. You never have to like ask who has the thing that you're using to snort out of, and you know which one is yours. Wetting your nostrils, particularly with saline, just water works too, but saline is better, beforehand, can help to avoid some of those cuts and microabrasions. And then this one, I mean, I think a lot of people might not be thinking about if they are using out in public, or like may not have the forethought to bring. But if you have a safer snorting kit, which lots of programs do put together and distribute, and you have just like paper, same idea as like putting paper down to prep your shot. If you can put paper down and put the substance you're snorting the substance that you are snorting, there we go, found it, down on the paper rather than on like the back of a toilet or a table that maybe hasn't been cleaned, that's going to be a little bit more sanitary.
Or a cell phone.
Yeah,
that's a big one.
If you're snorting off of the cell phone, I would say try to wipe it down beforehand, at least.
Yeah.
And then some programs also put these little like fake credit cards, like just plastic cards in snorting kits, so that people don't have to use their own credit cards to cut up lines, because much like cell phones, credit cards are very dirty. They go into machines all the time. Lots of people touch them. So yeah, those are my snorting tips.
One thing I really like to do with snorting is just in general, I keep like a plastic bag with a thing of Post-it notes in my car. So a lot of people snort stuff in my car, and a lot of people snort stuff in a lot of people's cars. And I find that when people are like on the road driving, they just grab a dollar bill.
Yes.
And so having the Post-it notes there and super accessible like that, so you can just grab them as easily as a dollar bill. And it's discreet too. So if you get pulled over, no one's gonna be like, "Why do you have Post-it notes?"
Totally. Notes for people who are like listening and not know are like you can make you can roll them up and make straws, and they're really good because that's sticky and like help too.
I was wondering if we could talk about hot rails. If you had any tips about hot rails, also.
I do not.
Okay.
I'm going to be transparent. I do not. Do you, though?
I have like only one. I have only one because people are using like the crack pipes that I hand out for hot rails. And like one big issue with that is they're way too short and people were burning their noses. And one of the people who I gave them to just the other day actually asked me for some rubber tubing and was like, "Oh yeah, we use those for hot rails so it's longer." So they use it as like an extender for the crack pipe. But just having something a little longer is basically the only tip I have for hot rails.
Yeah. When you being too short, like, oh, I wonder if the tip is going to be covers.
Oh, wait, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. I hear. Now I understand, but I don't know.
If anyone in the chat or anyone listening has any thoughts about that, one of the things that Jesse and I have always brainstormed about is like stainless steel straws. Are those a thing? Are those helpful? Do you use them? Do you like them? Is that something harm reduction program should carry? Something that we've always been wondering about.
One thing people told me was an issue with that is just that they're thinner, so they're harder to scrape out if you're trying to get what's stuck on the inside.
That makes sense.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, cool. I missed the thing we were talking about, harm reduction programs maybe carrying. Sorry.
Steel straws.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. They react to every
someone
sound.
else had an opinion.
Yeah. But, they've got strong safer use opinions. And then my last set of tips is on booty bumping, using drugs through your butt. My tips, I feel like, aren't necessarily tips so much as like common sense stuff, but maybe it can help people. You can use a needle. So like this is a Narcan syringe that I would typically screw a needle onto to draw up your substances and then push them up your butt. You also can use like a turkey baster. Just you want to make sure whatever you're using is clean. You also want to make sure that you're using clean water to dissolve your drugs. So it's like injecting substances, which I feel like hopefully goes without, but is a tip that I've had to give enough. That's one I include here. And then especially if you're using your fingers, I know lots of people use their fingers to put pills or powders up their butts. Then make sure that your hands are clean. Make sure that you've washed your hand beforehand. Again, you are touching a part of your body. There is potential you would be putting bacteria up there. Make sure that everything is as sanitary as possible. And I'm worried I'm going out again. Okay.
I don't think so. I think you're good.
Okay, cool. Those are my tips.
So one thing I think is important with boofing is just like having your nasal passage relatively clear when you're snorting. It can be really helpful to make sure you're getting your drugs when you want them. to make sure your rectum is clear when you're boofing. And also, you don't have to stick it up that far, and you can really do a lot of damage if you stick it up too far, and you can puncture yourself and cause bleeding. And it can just be very painful. The part you're trying to get to is very near the anus and not deep in the rectum. So it's not like the same as like an enema where you're trying to flush yourself out.
Yeah. No.
The membranes are right there.
Yeah. It's very shallow. It's like less than an inch into your butt.
Yeah, that's good to use numbers. That's helpful.
Yeah, and then I might have missed this if I cut out, but I know people do use lube just to make things easier and more smooth. So I think just having that as an option too can make it a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. You did not miss that. I should have put that in.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but that's such an obvious one.
Using lube can definitely help, and that like obviously goes for like if you're using a receptacle, but and not your fingers.
One thing,
but
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead, you're good.
I was just say one thing I think is important to like talk about with boofing. I'm a huge fan of boofing as like a harm reduction technique for people who are like want to transition to snorting, but find that transitioning from injecting to snorting is way too big of a jump. A lot of people just like say, okay, I'm going to stop injecting, and they automatically go straight to snorting, and they fail because it's too difficult of a jump. And so for those people who tell me that they're trying to switch to snorting, I always recommend booty bumping or boofing.
Yeah, that's a great tip and definitely a really good recommendation. I'm going to shout out Ceci Blanchard on Twitter, who used to be a filter writer, who has like really great boofing tips and graphics. So definitely recommend people check out Ceci's work.
That's good to know. I will look into that.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. Actually, I can just pull up the link and send it to the chat.
Wait, that's good to put it in the chat.
Yeah. So maybe we'll actually, are we through the slides, Kacey?
Yeah, we're through the slides. Let me turn them off.
We'll turn them off. Maybe we'll throw the chat up on here. We'll see if anyone wants to join us on the screen.
Yeah, please join us.
And yeah, we can tag the Twitter link.
Yeah.
Yeah, we covered a lot of stuff. I feel like talking really, generally about some of the safer use tips we have. One thing, would either of you be able to talk a little bit about dose splitting and piggybacking? That's something that comes up a lot, that people are like, I've heard of this thing, but I've never actually done it. And how people could kind of learn that tip.
Yeah, definitely. So is like if you have a sterile syringe and one used syringe, or you don't share your cooker or something, is a great resource or a great tool for putting drugs. So what you would do is essentially like fill your first syringe, fill the sterile syringe with your drug solution. So got water in here, and then you would take one out of the second syringe and very carefully just split half the drug into the second syringe. Then put the plunger back. Something that people have a lot of trouble with piggybacking is what this is called, is like not pushing out some of the drug solutions. So like being really slow and intentional when you put that plunger back and making sure that you're not pushing any of the drug solution out. I've actually never done it myself, but I've heard from people like front loading full syringe syringe tips is
We're losing
Oh, we're
you.
losing you. I think Casey's talking about front loading as an option too, where basically you could draw up the solution out of your cooker, your spoon, and then inject like, you know, into the front part of the syringe. So especially I think if the needle is twistable.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, I've never heard of that in my life.
Yeah, so you can actually take the needle off and then inject into the narrow part of the back syringe. So that way you don't have to remove the plunger, and then you could put the needle back on. But that only works, I think, with twistable needles. Is that what you were talking about, Kacey?
Yeah, I just tried demonstrated it. I don't know if my internet is working fully, but yeah, so you basically like these are needles and I the other needle, but you would very fill from here way you would it's falling the needle that you would ideally twist the needle on.
Right.
That way you wouldn't have to like worry about using any solution and put the plunger back in.
Right.
But yeah, it only works with the like front loading needle. Which pose other risks. Namely, they like hold a lot more dead space to get into the front part. But I know that like some people are backloading just because it's easier, or backloading piggybacking.
Yeah, and just to clarify, like the reason you would want to piggyback or backload is just because, you know, you wouldn't necessarily want to have like two people using syringes both going into the same cooker. And so the idea is just to use one to then transfer into two different syringes. And that makes it so that there isn't potential contamination into that one cooker that's being shared. So it's just one tip for basically sharing with someone else so that you have less risk of transmitting things like HIV or Hep C or even bacteria.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's a lot of reasons why people choose to backload. Some of them are for safety and some of them probably increase risk, but are still what people choose to do.
Yeah.
I find it, a lot of people use it also for like reducing overdose risk. They'll prepare 2 shots and do them consecutively instead of one large shot.
Yeah, that's really smart. And that's something I've heard too. Thanks, Jesse. Trying to think of other tips.
Yeah. Get in the chat. We're only going to be here a little bit longer, so you got to get in now.
Let's give her 10 more minutes.
Yeah. This is an ongoing conversation too. I mean, we're always talking about all these tips that we have to learn from each other, and there's so many ways people use, and people have so many methods that work for them. So it's always really good to hear and learn from other people.
Yeah, I love like when someone tells me something I've never heard before for a tip.
Me too.
Oh, I have a question. Someone told me that, I don't know if this is true or not, it's just what someone told me, that saline doesn't clot your blood as quickly. Do you know if that's true?
I don't know. I'm thinking back to my science classes that I'm taking right now. I'm in nursing classes and trying to figure out if we've talked about anything like that.
One thing I know for a fact about saline is that the pH is more similar to your blood. And so because of that, it does cause less like immediate trauma to the vein.
Yeah.
Which is why the vein like heals faster, you know, when you do inject with saline as opposed to sterile water. And so I wonder if that's related to that, if maybe just like it being more similar to your blood
Right.
makes it less likely for your blood to kind of like react to it and
that makes sense.
And be like, the foreign thing, I don't know what to do with this. I'm going to try to form a clot. I have a feeling that those things might be connected.
That makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Another good use for saline is it doesn't freeze as quickly. So if you're wintering outside, it's easier to have that. It doesn't freeze at as high a temperature, so it can get a little colder without freezing.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely helpful for folks.
Yeah, I think the thing I hear a lot about saline, even though I try to talk with people about the benefits, is that they're just not used to like the taste in their mouth, or just it kind of has like just a different feel. Do you have any thoughts or tips on like dealing with that kind of thing?
Sorry, the like taste in the mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think of like other things that put terrible like. I'm thinking particularly of like being Narcaned and the terrible taste that leaves in a mouth. And I mean, obviously you can't prepare for being Narcaned, but for something like that, I would probably tell people to like, if they can, chew gum or like be like eating something right before or right after they were using saline to inject, just so that like there's some other taste in their mouth.
Right. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But yeah, it definitely is a bummer when there's a weird taste in your mouth. And I'm trying to think of other tips on the spot. But I definitely
another complaint I hear is that it takes longer to mix because it's already has something mixed in with it.
Yeah.
So.
That makes sense.
I'm usually just like, try to be patient, heat it a little more. Like, I don't have like tips for that, like really, but when I offer people saline, I like let them know that it takes longer ahead of time, so they're not disappointed by it when they try it, and like it can be less frustrating if you just like know it's coming.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think of whether like if you're someone who doesn't normally heat your drugs, whether like heating would help things along a little faster.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
in general, heating speeds it up.
Definitely.
Wow, we did it.
We did
it. Well, thanks everyone so much for watching. This is going to be recorded and posted so that you can share. You can tell other people, hey, I watched this awesome live stream. Like I said in the beginning, there will be captioning options on YouTube once the recording is posted. And we are doing future live streams. We're doing one every month for the next 4 months, which is awesome. The next one we're doing is on drug checking, using drug testing equipment to see what's in your drugs. We're also doing one on know your rights, legal rights for people who use drugs in Maine. And then we're doing one on pregnancy, birth plans with someone who's a doula and certified birth educator, focusing specifically on supporting people who use drugs who are pregnant. We are Maine Access Points. We're a harm reduction organization here in Maine that has a couple mobile-based syringe service programs. We also have mail-based options to get you supplies if you live in a rural part of our state. Please check out our website, maineaccesspoints.org. You can find everything about our services there. We also are obviously on social media. You can, reach out to us directly through that platform if you like that method. Most important thing to know is you can reach out to any of our numbers anonymously. We don't need any personal information from you to make sure that we can get you access to services. And we care deeply about connecting with people in Maine. So definitely, I'm here, Jesse's here, Kacey's a friend based in Kentucky, but now you know about Kacey and can reach out to them as well. So we're just trying to build a harm reduction community here. And I know a lot of people that are connected to MAP maybe have never accessed harm reduction services before or have never had access to sterile supplies. So we're trying to build a community here, not just, not just the supplies, not just the resource, but also a place for people to come and get to know each other and really build connections that can be really sustaining and meaningful in all directions. So do either of you have anything else to add? Any final parting words?
Just thank you both so much for thank you and everyone who's watching so much for having me. And this was really nice. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, that's
it.
Thank you. That's it.
We did it. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Please reach out to us. Let us know your tips. Let us know what you learned, what you got out of this, and we can't wait to catch up with you next time. Bye.
Bye.